Hello students, let's talk about the past perfect tense. As most of you are aware, this tense is a bit more advanced than the simple tenses and the continuous tenses. What I'd like to do first with this tense is first talk about how we form it and then talk about when we use it. But before I even get into that, what I'd like to do is walk through a quick scenario that I made up to illustrate the use of this tense. So, imagine you would like the latest iPhone. You would like to buy this phone. I believe it's the iPhone 16 Pro Max. At least I think it is. So you tell your friend that you are going to buy this phone. You go to the Apple store at the mall. When you get there, the salesperson tells you that they no longer have the iPhone 16 Pro Max cell phone because they sold all of them earlier that day. And the term for that is they were sold out, okay? So you are sad. Your friend then asks you what happened and wants to know why you didn't buy the new iPhone 16 Pro Max. You are going to explain it by telling the two actions that happened earlier and which action happened first, the sequence of events. Okay, so here it comes. Now we're going to see the past perfect tense in use. So you may say to your friend, or you might say to your friend, when I arrived at the Apple store, they had already sold out of the iPhone 16 Pro Max. I'm going to repeat that sentence again. When I arrived at the Apple store, that was actually the second action. They had already sold out of the iPhone 16 Pro Max, which is the first action, So notice the first action came later in the sentence. We'll get into that in a little bit. But when I arrived is actually the simple past tense. Had sold out is the past perfect. Okay, so again, you're telling your friend what happened, and you're talking about two actions that happened in the past, but you have to differentiate between which one happened first and which one happened second. And it is with the past perfect tense that you will describe the first action. Okay, so let's get into this. All right, to form the past perfect tense, actually this is easier than the present perfect tense. If you remember the present perfect tense, we use have or has and then a past participle. But with the past perfect, we use simply the word had and the past participle. So it doesn't matter what subject pronoun you're using, the helping verb will always be had. So that's pretty easy. So let's conjugate the verb to return in the past perfect tense. I had returned, you had returned, we had returned, they had returned, he had returned, she had returned, it had returned. Again, notice that we use the word had for all of the subject pronouns. Even if we replace a subject pronoun with someone's name, we still use had. For example, Mary had returned. or Mary and I had returned. Okay? All right, let's try another example, and this time we'll use the verb to pay. So let's conjugate the verb to pay in the past perfect tense. I had paid. You had paid. We had paid. They had paid. He had paid. She had paid. It had paid. Okay, so far so good, right? It's not so difficult. Okay, when we want to make a sentence in the past perfect negative, once again, we have to use the word not. And we do that by simply placing it between the word had and the past participle. So let's look at some examples with the verbs we just used. So let's conjugate the verb to return in the negative past perfect tense. So you could say, I had not returned. You had not returned. We had not returned. They had not returned. He had not returned. She had not returned. It had not returned. While we are here, let's look at the contraction for had not. That would be hadn't. So I'll go through it again, but this time with the contraction. So I hadn't returned. You hadn't returned. We hadn't returned. They hadn't returned. He hadn't returned. She hadn't returned. It hadn't returned. And remember that contractions are best used in speaking, not writing. Okay, let's look at this again with the verb we used previously. So let's conjugate the verb to pay in the negative past perfect tense. I had not paid. You had not paid. We had not paid. They had not paid. He had not paid. She had not paid. It had not paid. And once again, we'll do it, but this time with a contraction. I hadn't paid. You hadn't paid. We hadn't paid. They hadn't paid. He hadn't paid. She hadn't paid. It hadn't paid. Okay, we're still working on the formation of this tense. So the next part is how we form yes/no questions. And again, those are questions that will give you a yes or no answer. And it's very simple. All we have to do is reverse the subject pronoun and the verb had. And there we have a yes/no question. So I had returned would be had I returned. Had you returned? Excuse me. Had we returned? Had they returned? Had he returned? Had she returned? Had it returned? Simply reverse the subject pronoun and the helping verb had. All right, and now let's look at the same thing, yes/no questions, with the second verb we used. So I had paid in a yes/no question would be had I paid? Had you paid? Had we paid? Had they paid? Had he paid? Had she paid? Had it paid? Okay, and then if we need to ask or write an information question, we simply take the yes/no question that we just did, but we put a WH word at the very beginning. And again, the WH words that I'm referring to are who, what, when, where, why, and how. So let's look at a couple. When had I returned? When had you returned? When had we returned? When had they returned? When had he returned? When had she returned? When had it returned? Okay, so I think that covers the formation of this tense. So, and now, when do we use this tense? Okay, so we use this tense to describe an action that happened in the past before another past action. So even though when you use this tense, you will be talking about two actions that happened in the past perfect indicates the first action. Let's look at some examples. Okay. The plane left at 10 a.m. We arrived at the airport at 10:30 a.m. All right, so we have two actions here. Now let's form a sentence. And I made a mistake here, so it should be, this should be we. Sorry about that. When we arrived at the airport, the plane had already left. So we've got the two actions here. Which one happened first? Well, that would be the one with the past perfect, okay, which is the plane left. The plane had left. I put the word already in parentheses because with this tense, we often use the word already. We don't have to do it, but we do most of the time. So let's look at this again. When we arrived at the airport, we arrived is actually the simple past tense. And that's the second action in this sentence. The first action is the plane. The plane had left. Okay, down here it says that we can reverse the structure of the sentence without changing the sequence of events. Be careful of the comma. All right, so let's take a look at what that means here. Okay, so at the top it says, when we arrived at the airport, there's your comma, the plane had already left. So we use a comma. So when we put, this is called a clause, when at the beginning, when we arrived at the airport, we need a comma. Again, that is the second action. But let's reverse this sentence here. The plane had already left when we arrived at the airport. So even though the sentence has changed and we put the when in the middle of the sentence with no comma, the sequence of events did not change. Okay, so once again, when we put when at the beginning of the sentence, when we blah, 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 comma, or whatever we're talking about, when the word when comes in the middle, there is no comma. Okay, let's take a look at another example. Okay, I finished cleaning at 6 p.m. My guests arrived at 7 p.m. Let's turn that into a complete sentence, one sentence. I had finished cleaning before my guests arrived. Which action happened first? I finished cleaning. Okay, let's take this sentence and reverse it. I had finished cleaning before my guests arrived. Okay, if we notice, this word before is in the middle of the sentence. We don't use a comma. But if I put it at the beginning, before my guests arrived, I had finished cleaning, we do need a comma. And once again, reversing the sentence does not change which action happened first and which action happened second, because it is the past perfect had finished, which will indicate that happened first. And it's the simple past, my guests arrived, will tell us what happened second. Okay, and here is another example. I taught math for 1 year. I graduated from college. Now let's form a sentence with those, let's form one sentence from these two sentences. By the time I graduated from college, I had taught math for 1 year. Which action happened first? I taught math for 1 year. And again, the first action will be described by using the past perfect tense, had taught. Okay, let's take that sentence and reverse it. Okay, so by the time I finished college, okay, we'll talk about this. This is called a time marker, but it's at the beginning. We will need a comma in the middle of the sentence. By the time I finished college, I had taught math for 1 year. Now, we can reverse the sentence, remove the comma, and it will go like this. I had taught math for 1 year by the time I graduated from college. I'm sorry, here I put finished. That should be graduated. Another mistake I made. Okay. Finished college and graduated is the same thing, but I like to keep the verbs the same. Okay, so these three words in the middle, or these three, more than three words here, but we call these time markers, and we use these often when we are using the past perfect tense. And those are when, by the time, and before. Again, when these three are at the beginning of the sentence, we need a comma. If they come in the middle of the sentence, we don't need a comma. Let's take a look at this. All right, it's saying the past perfect plus a time marker plus the simple past. Okay, so it says here, I had locked the door before you arrived. Okay, so right here, past perfect, here it is, had locked. Here's the time marker, before. I had locked the door before, and then your simple past, you arrived. Let's reverse that, but this time we'll put the time marker at the beginning. So here it is, before, and now we'll put the simple past before you arrived. I had locked the door, and there's your past perfect. So again, when I use before at the beginning of the sentence, I need a comma. When it comes in the middle of the sentence, no comma. Okay, let's look at another one. All right, past perfect plus time marker plus the simple past. Okay, so first of all, let's look at this time marker. There it is, when. All right, and the past perfect, the class had finished. Okay, there it is. The class had finished when, and then this will be your simple past, I arrived. No comma, because when is in the middle of the sentence. Okay, now let's reverse that sentence. Here's the time marker. When, the simple past, I arrived, and the past perfect, okay, excuse me, when I arrived, the class had finished. So again, with this sentence, what happened first? When I arrived, the class had finished. Well, let's look for the past perfect. The class had finished. That was the first action, and then I arrived. Okay, so as you can see, this tense, excuse me, gets a little bit more involved, but just keep practicing it, at least know how to form it. And also, if you did get a copy of English 2600, this would be a good time to go in there and start practicing with that tense. And that is it, and I will see you on the next one.